everybody. Jeff Antoniuk here from Jazzwire. Welcome to Guided Listening. I'm so happy you guys show up every week to check out some of these fantastic recordings and hopefully to get, another set of ears, maybe to guide you into a couple other things to listen to, and every once in a while there's some new recordings you haven't heard and of course some classics. Today we got a classic. I actually thought that over the couple of years of doing Guided Listening, I'd done all 5 songs on the Kind of Blue album. Turns out I've only done 3. So today I'm going to be doing So What, probably, the most famous, one of the most famous from the album. And there's one more left, and we'll get to that a little later in the year. So, of course, Kind of Blue, the album from 1959 with Miles Davis on trumpet, John Coltrane on tenor saxophone, Cannonball Adderley on alto saxophone. On this cut, we hear Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Jimmy Cobb on drums. I remember being at the University of North Texas back in the early 90s, and Jimmy Cobb was one of our guests down there. And, of course, somebody asked the question he'd probably been asked 10,000 times, like, what was it like, playing on the Kind of Blue album? And his answer was like, I don't know. I did a lot of albums that month or that year, and this was one of them. And, nobody knew it was going to be this religious relic that it's become. So, whether that's entirely true or whether after being asked that question 20,000 times over the years, he was a little tired of it or whatever. But it's interesting perspective, right? Like, there were a lot of people playing with a lot of the same people, and this was sort of a weird experimental album at the time, and certainly nobody knew they showed up that day to make the most famous, most important, one of the most well-selling albums of all time in the jazz genre. I don't think anybody knew that, right? So let's dig into it. But before we do, I'll set it up by saying this: the melody, the bass has the melody, and the horns are sort of comping in a sense. So that's atypical. This is modal music. So the Kind of Blue that was meant to be this, big shot fired for modal music, although there had been modal music, kind of in the air a little bit for the year or two before this, but that was the big deal. There's some great books written, by the way, about the recording session and everything else. I read them, and it's been a while, so it's fuzzy in my mind. But it's certainly said that Miles, with some help from Bill Evans, had just sort of conceived of this in the days or even hours before the recording session. So I'd love to know how much of that is exact, is hyperbole, how much is exact. But again, checking out these books. So the history I'll leave to you, and find those great answers. And please leave comments with what you know to be true about this stuff. But, to me, I want to get in and listen to it. One of the things I'm going to say is that especially with the soloist, we have Miles, then we have Trane, then we have Cannonball, then we have Bill Evans, what different voices they have. Yes, they play 4 different instruments. They have different voices. Got it. But their approach to the instrument. All those instruments can play fast, they can all play slow, they can all play loud, they can all play soft. There's a lot of similarities between these instruments too. And how deeply personal everybody's statement is. So of course we know these as some of the most important jazz musicians of all time. It would make sense, but it's kind of interesting to listen to how they approach this song. And by the way, the song is AABA, so it's old song form. The A sections, the first A section is 8 minors of D, 8 measures of D minor. That's it, D Dorian. Second A section, same thing. So now we're at 16 measures of one sound. The bridge goes up half a step to E flat minor, Dorian. The last A section goes back to D minor, Dorian mode. So there's literally 2 chords in this thing, there's one tonality, Dorian and minor, and at 2 different pitch levels. So there's almost nothing here. That was the point of paring things down, getting rid of all the chords and exploring a sound, sort of the way it was thought of. So let's jump in and we'll talk through it. We'll talk at the end. This is So What by Miles Davis. So this intro, Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass. And it's interesting, we're out of time. There isn't a pulse yet, but clearly they're playing unison ideas together. And there's our melody. So Paul Chambers sets up the tempo with that pickup, with those eighth notes. There's our first A section. So some people probably think this is where the song begins when the horns come in, but we're actually 9 measures into the tune by the time they come in. Now here's the bridge, up a half step, third 8-measure section. And that voicing, trumpet, alto, tenor, and the same expanded voicing on piano. So Jimmy Cobb swinging with no walking bass yet. And here comes the flip. Now we're walking and swinging. So I've listened to this hundreds of times, but when I listened to it this morning, I was struck by how aggressive the time is. It's chilled and it's open, it's impressionistic, it's all that stuff, but holy cow, the bass and the drums are just marching ahead. There is nothing light or whatever the right word is. It's so intense, but dialed back. Speaking of intense and dialed back, that's Miles Davis. So he plays 2 choruses, 64 measures, and I transcribed the solo. I think there are 3 times he plays a note that is not in the scale or the mode. So he's finding all these luscious, wonderful, juicy notes, but none of them are outside. And the notes that he plays that are outside the key are kind of easy to explain. A little bluesy vibe there. That was one of those notes. The space Miles plays with. It's a lesson to all of us. The power of saying something and being quiet. Miles was the master of being quiet, right? Lots of very simple patterns in his solo, though. It's not hard to see what he's doing a lot of the time. He's using a lot of really simple, powerful, foundational structures. It's not all just genius. We can see where it comes from. Coltrane. And that sound, and we can hear later Coltrane in there, the way he's chanting on some of these single notes. The way he was playing ba-do-ba-da-da-da-da, playing 2, 3, 4 of the same pitch. A very Coltrane thing to do. And these flurries of notes, double time. So of course, we know where Coltrane was going to take this down the road. We see hints of that here. So a really different approach than Miles took, right? Miles carefully building these structures and leaving all the space. And Coltrane kind of swinging for the fences. Three iterations of that idea. So he's listening to himself, motivic, developing ideas. And then there are these flurries of notes in between. So a lot of motivic moments in all this busyness. It's cool. And behind it, Jimmy Cobb, Paul Chambers, swinging. So there was a moment, have we missed it or is it coming, where Paul Chambers is pedaling on the bass. I think we missed it. Yeah, we missed that before, where Paul is pedaling and changes the texture behind Coltrane. So now Cannonball. How he plays, how he articulates his accent, so different than Coltrane and Miles. Does it sound like Cannonball's playing happier than Coltrane? Coltrane had kind of this dark, heavy kind of feel, and over the same chords, Cannonball's like the sun came out a little bit, is how I think about it. Woo! It sounds like he's playing in major, but he's not. How is he doing that? Well, we talk about that in Jazz Wire. It's a very specific thing he's doing, and he's not just playing major thirds in minor. That would not work. He's doing a very specific thing. Now there's his articulation. There's all those other things that give him that buoyant sound, and we can talk about those. What's he doing articulation-wise to make it pop a little bit? Lots of double time, lots of flurries like Coltrane, but they feel different. They land different, right? Woo! So it's interesting that this whole modal thing, Miles didn't send out a memo. He didn't say, hey guys, we're going to do this. We're going to invent this modal stuff. And here's how it works. There was none of that. So it's interesting that Cannonball, master of bebop, master of double time, master of blues. So a lot of that wasn't particularly modal in a sense, the way he was approaching it. He was playing the way he knew how to play on that day. Very cool piano solo with these clusters. And, of course, the horns flipping the rhythm around on that background part from the melody. Amazing clusters. So a cluster, notes that are half steps or whole steps, and a bunch of them. It's kind of going like that. Is a cool cluster, actually, that elbow chord. You can hear those half steps in there. What a cool, really different piano solo. So now here's the first A section of the next chorus. So is this a bass solo? What's going on? Oh, melody. So I had to listen. Is this the second A section? Because I know by the form this is the second A, but was that an interlude? Like, why that 8 measures of walking bass? So what happens here? Ah, this is the bridge. So it's interesting. After Bill Evans' solo, we didn't go back to the melody. There was 8 measures of walking bass, which I'm going to say was a mistake. Paul Chambers didn't realize, oh, your solo's over. Oh, I missed the pickup. So he just walked for 8. Brought the melody in. Now this could have been determined they wanted to do it this way, but I think probably that's what happened. So somebody that's checked out the book or knows the story, please let us know. All right, so the horns have dropped out. It's interesting, we can hear Jimmy Cobb catching with the cymbal. Yeah, we're not going to listen to that one right now. Catching with the cymbal, catching with the snare drum, the do-da, and now it's fading. So again, why a fade there? And so my hypothesis is when we have a fade in acoustic jazz, it's usually because the band didn't quite know what was going on, or we didn't have an ending worked out, or somebody missed the train. And then we just kind of faded out. So that could be what's happening there. But the board fade, that wasn't the band fading. I could hear them playing softer and softer, wondering what was going on. But then there was also the board fade on there too. So so I'm sort of guessing that that's what they did is they fixed that take. So I can't remember how many takes they did. So maybe there was that missed entrance of the melody after Bill Evans' solo. Maybe there was the "What's our ending supposed to be?" But on the whole, they listened to it. The producer or Miles or whoever decided, like, yeah, let's stay with that one. Whether we're running out of studio time or, yeah, we like the solos good enough. And it's amazing to think there's mistakes on this, such an important recording, or that there's little missed opportunities, or that they stayed with this one because they were literally running out of time. The studio block was almost over. Those things are always a concern. These were human beings, operating and, with whatever they had to operate. So, but geez, yeah, what an incredible landmark recording, and how much simplicity is there. How many things that are so different, such as Bill Evans' comping and his soloing, the different voices, just beyond that people are playing different instruments. But, if Coltrane and Cannonball had traded instruments and Coltrane was on alto and, that'd be cool. Never thought about that. But we could still know who was playing, right? It had nothing to do with alto or tenor. It had to do with their voice, right? And sure, their voice is associated with that instrument, but how they approach it, really, really interesting. So yeah, it's, so much has been said about this recording and this, that particular song and the composition, everything else. But it was great to listen into it. And the one thing that really caught me, as I said, when I put it on this morning just to listen through it once, was how driving the time was. It almost took my breath away. And I've heard this hundreds of times, but it was like, geez, like these guys are not messing around, right? So lots of times, I've had this experience as a younger player myself. I've had this experience with groups that I coach or inside Jazzwire, that when people want to play sort of quieter, they play slower and they swing less. No, volume doesn't have anything to do with how hard you're going to swing, or if we're going to play free, like a more open feeling, we're going to play with worse time. No, open doesn't mean more, so it's so easy to connect things together, and the whole becomes kind of worse as our tempo becomes worse, as our volume becomes worse, as our tone becomes worse. So it was very striking that, knowing that this is, this big deal impressionistic sort of take, and all the space that Miles leaves, how aggressive in a good way the time is. So that's my lesson for today that I take from this, and I'm not sure that I noticed it the other 300 times I've listened to it. So it's a good day because I learned something new about this recording. So hey, thank you very much for tuning into this. Please jump over to Jazzwire, take the free trial there. We've had almost 200 people in the free trial recently, which is really exciting. Folks from all over the world, people like you, adult students who are interested in moving ahead with your playing, and Jazzwire is the place to do it. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Check out the album. Listen to Kind of Blue over the weekend, and see what else you can discover. Leave some comments, and I'll see you next week.